Lilly, welcome to the podcast. It is so wonderful to have you here.
It's lovely to be here. Thanks for having me.
I can't believe we've waited this long to talk to you.
I know.
I've been a fan since Mixed Messages, which of course goes back a few years now.
It does. Yeah, that's quite old now. Yeah, that's quite a few years ago now.
But I want to start off with what's new. And you've actually are releasing a spinoff of the Blue Billings series. Now, before we talk about that spinoff, let's bring people up to date who may not know what the Blue Billings series is. Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, Blue Billings is my paranormal romance. So it's about the romance between a cartoonist, Levi, who moves to York after a bereavement, and he inherits a house. As soon as he moves in the house, strange things start to happen. And he becomes aware that the house is more than likely haunted. And he's introduced to a ghost tour leader who is Blue Billings. They have rather a good first meeting. And Blue decides to help him find out what is actually wrong with the house. And events escalate until they're both in danger. So it's a sort of paranormal romance. It's set in York, which is an absolutely amazing city and is chock full of ghost tours and that sort of thing if you ever visit. And it's full of banter and snark and scary things. And I absolutely loved writing it.
Banter and snark, which are one of the things you're best known for.
Yeah, absolutely.
What was it like going down the paranormal path? Because, I mean, before that, you'd really written contemporary.
It was strange. I mean, the story was in my head long before I even wrote Rule Breakers. So it's a very old story in my head. And I'd sort of got to the stage, I was a librarian for many years. And I just never seemed to have time to write it. At first, I didn't feel able to write it. You know how when you first start writing? And then after that, there never seemed to be time to write it. And so I was sort of either just starting a series or in the middle of a series. And I put it off. And then I left my job to write full time. And I had a spare gap in my diary. And I thought, I'm just going to write it for me, because it was so different from anything I'd ever written about. But the story was in my head and it wouldn't go. So I thought, I'll just write it for me. And at the end of it, I probably won't publish it, but at least I'll have written it, And I wrote it and I absolutely loved the characters. And in the end, I finished it. And my husband was really interested because we'll walk the dog at night and I talk at him, poor bloke, for about an hour, just about all the characters. But he was really interested in it. So he said, can I read it? If you're not going to give it to anybody else, can I read it? So I gave it to him. And he rang me the next day and he was at work and he was like, I'm in the car and I can't put this down. It's so good. You've got to publish it. So he's not somebody that reads a huge amount. So to capture him, he's always doing something. So to capture him was quite good. So I gave it to my beta reader, Leslie Copeland, and she was like, yeah, this needs to be published. So, but originally I was never going to publish it.
Wow, that's amazing that you would,
even
at this stage in your career, write something and potentially not publish it.
Yeah, it was just in my head and I wasn't sure. I think it's hard to judge, when you write a different genre, and it's very hard to judge the way that you would judge your normal stuff. Usually when you write, you think, I think this is going to work. But when it's a different genre, it just takes probably a bit more reinforcement for you to actually believe it.
Had you considered to go with a different pen name? Because we see that happen periodically too, that as genres change, that there might be a shift in pen name.
I never even considered it, and I don't know whether I've not got a very big business head or whatever, but I sort of thought, well, it's still very recognizably me. It might not be a contemporary rom-com, but it's still very recognizably my voice. And I thought, no, I don't think I'm going to. Readers can know it's me, and then if they choose to read it, they'll read it, and if they don't want to, they won't.
And like you said, it's got the snark and the banter, so that kind of your thing. So it makes sense.
You can still tell it's me.
So tell us about the spinoff. I mean, you've cooked up something to do with Will, who readers have already met in the original series. So what's going to be happening?
I have. I've had so many requests for Will. It's basically a spin-off. So when we meet him, he's actually now, it's after the events of The Quiet House, which is the second book in the Blue Billings series. Will is now working for the Viscount, who was introduced in the second series, and he has opened an occult bookshop. And Will is working for him. But it's very, very temporary to Will. He's very much how Blue was at the beginning of his books, in that he's very closed off. They've been through some terrible times, and he's decided that he's going to move on. And into his life comes Jem, the wildlife cameraman. And he was introduced in the second book. And he is on leave. He broke his leg and missed a year-long job in the Antarctic. And so he's found himself working for a group of YouTube ghost hunters. And he's filming them. And he comes to York because he wants Blue's help, because he feels that the ghost hunters have bitten off more than they can chew, and they actually have something that's real here. And they're investigating a very violent poltergeist haunting of a family in a house. And they've gone to investigate. So he's come for Blue's house, and Will ends up going with Jem to this house to help him. And they're sort of locked down. I don't know if you've ever watched the YouTube and the Discovery ghost hunting programs.
Those scare me too much. I'm a complete scaredy cat.
I am so addicted to them. I love them. And there's literally lots of shrieking and shouting, and they're really entertaining to watch. But yeah, so that's very much the sort of thing that he comes into. But this house the poltergeist haunting is very real. And he finds himself in the dangerous situation of being in a house where his safety is compromised, but also he's in the house with somebody who he's very attracted to and doesn't want to be attracted to. So that's basically the premise of Will's story.
Where did the idea for this kind of come from as you were looking to build a story for Will?
Don't know. I think it was the poltergeist, actually. I've always been interested in poltergeist, and I liked the idea of it happening in a normal house. So it's not a historical house. It's not a big mansion, the way that we sometimes associate hauntings with. This is a normal house with a normal family. And it's just taking that element because it's so out of the ordinary. Do you know what I mean? You don't really see it like that. We associate ghost hauntings and things like that with rattling chains and big old buildings. So I quite like that element of it for a change.
Reminds me of that movie from the 80s, Poltergeist, where it was just in the suburban family home that all of that went down.
Oh my God, I'd forgotten all about that. I remember watching that when I was a kid. And do you remember when the mum went in to save her? And my mum always used to say, I don't think I could have done that for you.
So much terror in that movie from me watching it in the theater. I cannot even tell you.
It was the clown that did it.
The clown, the tree, the mom going through. Yeah, the whole thing. It just was
absolute. Yeah, that's an old one.
What was your favorite bit in writing this new book?
I think the spooky stuff, actually. I really, really enjoy writing that. Although I usually get the ideas about 3 o'clock in the morning, which is not the best time to start thinking of really scary things.
No, not at all.
It's actually the worst time, but that's when I get it. So my husband sort of got used to me suddenly jerking awake at 3 o'clock in the morning and tapping away on my phone with the screen light on. So he's got used to that. But yeah, I really liked exploring that frightening aspect and sort of blending it with this relationship, because to me, if you're writing anything like this, there's got to be an even balance. So it can be a spooky story, but I've read loads of those, not MM romance or anything like that, but just generally. And I've always ended up feeling a little bit shortchanged with the relationship in some of the big blockbusters. And I sort of thought, well, it's got to be both. I can't write a spooky story if there's no relationship development. It's got to have an equal billing, so to speak. Mm-hmm. So I find that interesting. And it's something that I'm very careful with when I'm writing. I'm always sort of thinking to myself, great, that's spooky, but where's my relationship beat now? Where's this development? What's happening with them? So yeah, they're very interesting books to write.
I would imagine it must be similar to like how authors of romantic suspense have to balance that suspense, the mystery, the thriller with the romance. You're doing the same thing here.
Yeah, you've just constantly got to think there's got to be more happening than just that.
So you've still got Blue Billings, and now there's the spinoff. Where do you see these two things moving forward? Are you done with Blue Billings, or does it continue? And what more happens with the spinoff?
I've got the potential idea for a third Blue and Levi book, but it's not quite ready yet. It's got to percolate in my head for a little bit longer. So I've got the potential idea for a third one for him. I always leave a book with a happy ending, but the Blue Billings and Will's books are a little bit more open-ended in that you can leave them knowing that they're completely happy, but also that there's more to explore. And with Will, I've left things which can be explored if I want to.
Very cool. Do you actually make research trips to York since you've got that whole kind of town sitting right there.
Yeah. Yeah, I've been loads of times. I was at university in Leeds, which is near York. So I used to go to York for weekends anyway. But when I first started writing the Blue Billings, my husband and I took a research trip for a week there. And then I'll go back occasionally just to check up on things or to get ideas. And I went back recently. I did a meet with some readers, but I also did quite a bit of research for the third Blue book. So it's all there ready for me when I start to write it.
I could just imagine you doing your own version of a ghost tour when you meet up with readers in York.
Do you know, it's really weird, but when I first started writing Blue Billings, for saying the story is the mysterious and amazing Blue Billings wasn't even the main character. He wasn't even a big character. What he was just a ghost tour leader that existed for exposition. So he was going to tell Levi the history of the house he was living in, and that was it. He would go. And originally the story was going to be about two men that were property developers and bought this house in a sale, only to discover that it's really, really haunted. And I couldn't make it happen in my mind. I could see Levi really, really clearly, but I couldn't see the other character, and I couldn't even find a name for him, which is, if you're a writer, you know, you sort of know that's it, they're not coming forward. And we were booked to go for this week's trip, and I said to my husband, I don't think it's going to be any good. I can't make the story come together. So my husband loves these research trips. So he's like, yeah, we'll just go, you know, we'll go for a week and you can have a look. And any research you do is not wasted, you know. And we went. And on the second night, we went on a ghost tour. And they're brilliant. If anybody goes to York, you really have to go on them. There's so many of them. But my sort of husband was striding ahead and I was sort of behind him a bit, just looking and thinking. And we came to the house, which is actually, it does feature in the book. The story is a real story about a little girl that got locked in a house during the plague. But the windows are really low to the street. And I was sort of looking at it and I was thinking, God, I wouldn't really want to live in a house like that. Imagine if you were walking around naked and, you know, you open your curtains and there's a ghost tour. And instantly I thought, oh my God, that's how they meet. And then for the rest of the tour, while this poor lady was talking, I was just walking along, writing it in my head. And we got to an Italian restaurant afterwards. And I wrote the first meeting between Blue and Levi on a menu. So going on that ghost tour really changed everything, because I just suddenly thought, it's Blue that's the main character. And that's why he keeps cropping up. And that's why I can't see this other character. And once I thought that, everything snapped into place. And it just happened.
Oh, that's amazing. And that you sat there and wrote it on the menu. I hope you still have the menu tucked away in your archives.
My husband's got it. He was just staring at me and he was like, oh my God, I can't believe you're doing this.
You never know when inspiration's going to strike. That's awesome.
You do not.
Now, last fall, which would be fall of 2021, you celebrated your 5th anniversary as a writer of romance, which is amazing. Congratulations. A little bit late, but congratulations.
Thank you. Can't believe it. 5 years.
What got you started writing and as a writer of romance and gay romance?
I think as a writer, we spend our lives with daydreams, don't we? I would drift off and I would have a story running in my head. I would come out of films and I would think, well, I really like those characters, but I'd have done it differently. You know what I mean? You've got these stories. And I was also a librarian, so I worked with books and I used to talk about it. And in the end, my mum and dad bought me a laptop for my birthday. And on it was a note saying, okay, do it. You know, just do it.
Mom and dad.
I know. And I thought, you know what, I'm going to. It's something that I need to do. So I wrote the first one and I wrote 3 books, which were an MF series about a British rock band, Beggar's Choice. And in the way I got into writing gay romance was in the 3rd book, which was the bass guitarist Bram's book, I introduced his best friend, Matt, who was gay. And I absolutely adored Matt. I loved him. And you can always tell with me when a secondary character is going to get something, because I give them all the best lines and they keep popping up in scenes that they're not supposed to be. They sort of take control. And so the book came out and I had a lot of requests for Matt's book. And I thought, I'm going to write it. You know, I've been reading gay romance for a long while. So I thought, I'm going to write it. I really, really love him. I want to give him a story. And originally it was supposed to be a novella. And if anyone knows me, they know that I cannot, I'm just terrible at writing short. It's got to go long. And so it got long and it became The Summer of Us, which was Matt and John's story, which was about two men who hated each other, who ended up stuck together in this villa in the south of France where they were both working, and about how they came together over that summer and were together. I think I just felt all of a sudden like I'd found my groove. You know, I think most writers say that. There's one book where there's a click and it's like, oh, I really love this. Do you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
When you first start writing can be really, really hard because it's such an alien thing to do. And then all of a sudden you hear a click, and Some of Us was that for me. And I never really looked back, and that was how I started.
Are those MF books published somewhere? Is that where your alternate pen name is, or did you cast those to the side and just start with Summer of Us?
This is how brilliant I am. I took them up about 2 years ago because I wanted to re-edit them and give them some new covers. I gave them some new covers, and I've got the edits back, and I'm still working through them. So they will be republished, but
wonderful.
Just not at the moment. Yeah, I just wanted to tidy them up.
Yeah, I understand how that goes, because some of those, you look back at your older works and you're like, maybe I should freshen those a bit.
Absolutely. It's sort of looking at them with your fingers over your eyes. It's like, oh no, I almost don't want to read these. But they've been edited, and they're just waiting for me to finish up with them, and then they'll be back on market again.
What were some of the earliest gay romances you were reading? Who are the authors who are responsible for getting you hooked on the genre?
I think I followed over with Ella Frank because I'd read her MF series and then followed over into her Try series, which I loved. But I think I really, really loved and was completely obsessed by the Abigail Rue and the Madeline Urban, the Cut and Run series. I absolutely loved that. Really loved it. Just lots of other different authors after that. But they were sort of the ones that pulled me in and hooked me.
Where do you think your particular style of snark and banter came from?
I think that's just me, and it's my family. My mum and dad were publicans in the 80s. They kept pubs, and my dad is one of the funniest men I've ever met. He's really, really witty. And he was a real old style landlord, very much a character. And with my dad, my sister always said, and I always said, that if you can make him laugh, he's almost more proud of you than if you've got academic qualifications. He loves being entertained and being made to laugh. So we sort of honed that, and then I married my husband, who's an incredibly sarcastic man, and then we raised 2 sarcastic children. So it's part of the family. That's the way we are. And it's also a very British banter, that sort of thing.
Yeah, there's nothing better really than one of your books in audio with all of the proper accents going on and everything.
Well, I'm really lucky to have Joel do that because he's amazing.
He is a master of the accents.
Yeah. And of humour. He's got really, really good comic timing.
Yes, that's very true too. And you need that, especially I think when you're, playing all the characters, you've got to be able to strike that timing well.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, he's got the dialogue beats down and everything. He's very, very good.
Now, after Summer of Us, I mean, you really came out strong with series that readers just adore, with Mixed Messages and then Finding Home.
Yeah.
Now, for people who have not maybe met up with Mixed Messages yet, let's start there and tell everybody what that series is about.
Well, Mixed Messages is my contemporary romance series. It's set in London, and it's about a group of friends in London. The first book's Rule Breaker, which is about the romance between a commitment-phobic, very grumpy boss, Gabe, and his extremely snarky assistant, Dylan. And they start a relationship together, and it's about the trials and tribulations of that. The second book is Dealmaker, which is Dylan's best friend, Jude, who is a model, but through a comedy of errors ends up nannying for an actor, Asa Jacobs, and his little boy, Billy. And the third book is about Henry, who is Gabe's best friend, who's a lawyer, and his romance with Evo, and the two are former stepbrothers. So there's lots of snark, there's a bit of angst.
It's such an amazing world that you created here, because I wanted to know all these people, even Grumpy Gabe.
Thank you.
But I have to say, I think Dealmaker just stole my heart, because some of those nannying moments and Jude and Asa, I just can't even tell you. They're just they shouldn't have gotten together, but they did.
No. I loved writing that. I had such a lot of fun writing that. And I loved writing Billy. I mean, at first I was a little bit wary about writing Little Boy because they always say don't bring children into books, but I loved Billy. Actually, a lot of Billy's moments are stolen from my children. They did a lot of those things and I remembered them. So yeah, Billy's a little bit of a mixture of them.
Do your children know that they're basically written into books?
Yeah. They quite often say to me, and I'll get my notebook out and they're like, oh, Mum, stop. Just stop.
You can't do things like that around a writer because you're apt to end up in the book. I mean, that's just the way it goes.
You are the material.
How did you come up with Mixed Messages? And had you always planned that it would be a series, or did it just kind of grow from Rule Breaker?
No, absolutely not. It was actually the series that was never meant to be a series. Rule Breaker was supposed to be standalone. And actually, before I wrote it, I was actually thinking of quitting writing altogether.
Oh, no.
Yeah, it was. I had a very demanding job. I was a librarian, but I was also a child protection officer. So there were long hours and it was very involved. And my 2 boys were quite young then. And I was sort of thinking to myself, am I being selfish, taking this, the time that could be theirs and, sort of scribbling away. And I said to my husband, I'm thinking about quitting it. And he persuaded me not to, because he said, at the end of the day, this is something for you. It's not you as a mom. It's not you as a wife. This is something that you really love and you should carry on. And I thought, you know what? I'd really, really wanted to write this book. Well, I'd actually wanted to read a book about a boss and his assistant. And I wanted it to be sort of, really fun. And there wasn't a great deal about office romance at that time. And I thought, I'm just going to write it and I'm going to unleash all the snark, and I absolutely loved writing it. But yeah, it was never meant to be a series. And then it came out and it was very successful. And Leslie Copeland, my beta reader, said to me, what are you writing next? And I was like, well, you're going to carry on. What are you writing? And I was like, I think I'll write a second chapter for romance. And she was like, no, you've got to write Jude, because there was so much demand for Jude's. And then obviously there was a demand for Henry, and that's how the series grew. So it was the series that was never intended.
Leslie is such a great book whisperer, essentially.
She's amazing.
Like, you need to go write that. Now you should go write that.
I know. And we all do as she tells us.
Exactly.
We absolutely do. Yeah, she's amazing, and she's got a really good instinct. I only have her as my beta reader. I think probably because I'm so much of a people pleaser. If I had lots of beta readers, I would never, ever finish a book. But Leslie has this unerring instinct, and she will say, right, that works, that doesn't work, this needs, and I trust her. So, yeah, she's brilliant.
You mentioned you were a child protection officer. That's a heavy-duty job.
Yeah, it is, yeah. So, and it was combined with being a librarian, because obviously I was a school librarian for a long while, and if you work in a school, libraries are a safe spot. Mm-hmm. And it's a good place for spotting problems, you know what I mean, when the kids come in. Mm-hmm. And yeah, I was that for a number of years. And it is a very worthwhile job, but really hard.
I can't even imagine. I could also see the writing as being kind of the turn your brain off from that even for a few minutes.
Yeah, I tended to write, because I was a school librarian, I tended to write in the school holidays, because I could switch my brain off from it then, and that's how I wrote for a number of years. And then obviously I packed up to go full-time writing a couple of years ago.
Which is awesome to be able to make that transition.
So wonderful. I'm very, very, very lucky. I've got some wonderful readers, and I'm very lucky to be doing it, because it's an amazing job.
Now, as you came out of Mixed Messages, you started up Finding Home. Yeah. Where were you looking to kind of take your writing after you'd done the 3 Mixed Messages books?
I think after I wrote Risk Taker, there was a huge demand for Silas, because Silas was Henry's brother and he was an earl living in Cornwall. Again, I'm going to actually give you the impression that I don't know what I'm doing. But after I wrote the Mixed Messages series, I was going to write another series, another book. And we'd gone to Cornwall to do some research for that. So I did all the research, and I'd sort of put Silas's book. I knew I wanted to write it, but I'd sort of put that on the back burner, and I thought I'll just write something between. And on the last day of the research, we'd got a free day, and we were sitting down to breakfast, and my husband was talking to somebody, and I just picked up this old guidebook, and there was an old National Trust property near the bed and breakfast that we were staying in. And I said to my husband, should we just go and have a look? Because I knew that Silas was an earl, and I knew that, he lived in Cornwall. And I thought, that I can kill 2 birds with one stone while I'm down here, and I can do a bit of research and see if I can find the setting. And we went, and it's the most beautiful house I've ever been to. And I think some places have this amazing atmosphere. And it was so tranquil, peaceful, and beautiful. And we sat in the lavender garden. And I don't know if you heard ours or read ours. There is a scene in the lavender garden where this Londoner, this quite brash Londoner, has come from London to Cornwall, and he's sitting in the garden. It's where he meets Silas for the first time. He isn't aware he's the Earl that he's meeting, but that's who he is. And we were sitting in the garden, and that scene just came into my head, full Technicolor, and I saw it all in my head. And we literally got back to the B&B, and I wrote the first chapter of Ozzy's book there and then. And the book went very quickly after that. It's probably one of the quickest I've ever written a book, but it just flowed. So
Your research trips are amazing.
They are, aren't they? My husband loves them. The other week he was like, shall we go to the Caribbean? Should we set a book in the Caribbean? I was like, no, we're going to Wales.
Caribbean, Wales. There's a big difference there.
Not much difference. Obviously, the weather is completely similar. But no, I love our research. And my husband's really good to go on research because he just talks to everyone he meets, anyone. And he's really lively and very interested. So they are lovely, actually. I love doing research.
When's the Wales trip happening?
In a few weeks.
Nice. Do you have a book you're thinking of to research there? Or is this more about going to Wales to see what manifests?
I'm thinking of setting something there. Yeah, the whole book won't be set there, but some of it will be. And I like to get things set in my head. And it's very valuable if you're doing something to actually be able to go there and write your impressions down. I think it makes the scene come alive if you're actually sitting there and writing it down.
That's amazing. I need to do more research trips, I think.
You do it Caribbean, obviously.
For sure, yeah, because the weather would be awesome.
Give us a shout.
Now, we've got some questions from our Patreon community.
Yeah.
And this first one from Rhonda. I'm pretty sure that, we've touched on this just a little bit. Because Rhonda asks, many of your books interconnect through siblings and friends and relationships. How much of this is planned versus a secondary character demanding a book? Now, of course, you've already mentioned that often you seed the secondary characters and they get all the best lines.
Yeah.
But then I come back to what you said about Mixed Messages, for example, that it was the series that was never meant to be.
Yeah.
And yet you'd kind of set Jude up at the same time. So
yeah.
How has all that maybe evolved through the years that you've been writing from not, having a standalone to now, looking forward to how things might pan out?
I don't know. I mean, I think still sometimes secondary characters will suddenly have very loud voices all of a sudden, and you listen, and if they intrigue me, if they interest me, then they'll either get a short story or a full book. And so that part of it can't be planned. It just sort of happens, it's sort of magic, really. But then you've got other series where it's completely planned. So, for instance, the Close Proximity series is a 3-book series set around this sort of mixed group of people and friends. But the entire series was planned to culminate with the 3rd book. So in the first, which was Felix and Max's book, when we first meet Felix and Max, they are exes, they have split up, they're very, very snarky towards one another. We don't know why they've split up. But it's very obvious that Max wants Felix back and Felix does not want Max back. And so the whole of the Close Proximity, so there's 3 books in them, and in the first 2, Best Man and Charlie Sunshine, I always wanted to feed the reader this thing that was happening in the background, this relationship that had come to an end, and it was playing out in the back of the other people's story. That was my entire aim, that when we got to the 3rd one, you'd be able to see in full what happened and what happens after that. So yeah, the Close Proximity series was very planned around that. It wasn't an accident.
I like how it all seems very organic. Sometimes they crop up, sometimes it's a bit of magic, sometimes it's planned.
I think that's the best way, to be honest. You just go with the flow. Well, it is for me anyway. I might drive somebody else, crazy, but for me it's fine.
And of course, as long as it works for you, that's all that really matters, right?
Yes.
Yeah. I think that's one of the things we always learn about writing. What works for one may not work for the other, and vice versa.
Absolutely. I think that's the most valuable advice you can give for anyone. You may look and pick up good ways of practice, but focus on what suits you and don't try to do what other people do, because it might not suit you. You get your own instincts in the end. If you write long enough, you get your own instincts as to what will work, what won't work. And sometimes they're right, sometimes they're wrong. But I think you're better going off your own.
Yeah, absolutely. Good advice for any of the writers out there listening. Rhonda also is curious if you use a series or universe Bible to keep track of everything, or some other way that you keep track of your series and how everything fits together.
I don't use one for my contemporary rom-coms at all. That's all in my head, and it's pretty easy to keep in my head, actually. The connections are all there. But for the Blue Billing series and Will's new series, yes, I do. I have somebody do a series Bible for me, and they are invaluable when you're writing. And it's like, I can't remember what colour eyes he has. I can't remember this. It's all there for you, and it's just so handy. So, yeah, I mean, I've literally been looking at mine this morning because I wanted to check something for Will's story. And the information is there, whereas before I'd have, had to trawl through the whole book trying to find something. So, yeah, I do use them for those because the plots are very, very complicated. So,
is part of that because of the world building around the paranormal universe?
Yeah, definitely. And there's a lot of connections there, and there's a lot of things that happen that I want to keep. You also don't want to duplicate anything, because sometimes that's easy to do. If you wrote a book 2 years ago, sometimes something comes to you and you think, well, that's a really good idea. And then you think, oh, no, I did it in the first book.
We've also got a couple of questions from Katie. The first one is, do you write what you want, even if you think people won't like it, or do you try to write to an audience? And I suspect Blue Billings factors into this question a little bit.
I always write what I want to read. I have never deviated from that. I mean, you're always aware as a writer that you're writing to an audience, but I prefer not to think too much about that, because I think it can sort of stop you in your tracks a bit. And I write what I want to read, because I can't be passionate about two characters day in, day out if I'm not interested in their story, And so I always write what I want to read and what feels good.
Which works well for the reader, because if you hadn't written what you wanted to read, we might not have Rule Breaker.
Yeah, absolutely. That's the prime example of it. I wanted to read it. I couldn't find it. And I thought, I'm just going to write it. So, yeah, I write what I want to read.
And Katie's also curious about differences between the UK and US romance audiences. And is there anything that particularly that you've noticed that like US readers love or hate versus what the UK readers are looking for?
I don't think there is really. We're all just romance readers at the end of the day. I think there are probably small things that American readers don't like and British readers do, but on the whole, they're just exactly the same. They want the happy ever after, they want a nice journey to get it, that sort of thing.
Yeah, I think the one thing that might mess up the US readers is occasionally those British spellings. But
oh, yeah.
In a British set book, I think they have to be there.
Absolutely, yeah. I do get the odd email, and if you write for Amazon, you have a dashboard with Amazon and the KDB dashboard, and readers are allowed to suggest things that you've done wrong. And I think most British writers at one point or another have had somebody go through their book. I certainly have, saying this is spelt wrong, and it's like, no, it isn't. That's British spelling, and I am British.
And the books are set in Britain, so
yeah. Absolutely, yeah. So please don't ever do that, because what happens is Amazon then puts a thing on your book saying there are issues, and that issue could be somebody just thinking that you're not spelling things properly, and you are. So yeah, there's a difference with the spelling. But again, I don't get it that often, and I'm sure there are pop culture references that American readers won't necessarily get to start off with. But obviously, my characters are English. And it would be silly to give them references that wouldn't ring true. Mm-hmm. But, I read an awful lot of American romance. And if I see something that I don't understand, I'll look it up, and if I don't feel that it's particularly important, I'll just keep reading. So I think on the whole, that's what happens.
And sometimes you find fun things. If you look up British pop culture, you'll go find something new to watch on Netflix or something. Absolutely. Yeah, you do get a lot of it, yeah. And there's always, in my Facebook group, there was always a debate going on about cakes and biscuits and things like that. What we English eat and what the Americans eat. So there's always a debate going on in there about it. Yeah, I ended up with so many questions after I binged so much British Bake Off during the pandemic. All the different things we call things. And
Yeah, biscuits. Biscuits. We've just had that. The difference between biscuits and cookies, because biscuits to us are sweet biscuits, whereas I think your biscuits are very similar to our scones.
A little bit, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, so there's a definite difference there. And jumpers, somebody said the other day, your carrot's always wearing a jumper. What is it? Because you say sweater, don't you?
Yes.
Yeah.
It took me a while to figure out what that was. Was the jumper the sweater or some combination of the outfit? Or...
Yeah, absolutely. It was so funny because everyone was showing pictures of what they thought it was. And it's like, oh, no, it's a sweater.
Yeah, and trainers, I think, are sneakers.
Yeah, they are. Yes.
Yeah,
we always say trainers.
And that just makes it fun. The differences like that. At least I find them fun.
I said that. I actually said that in the group. I love the fact that we have all these differences and you find things out all the time in books. That's what books should do.
Yes. Says the librarian. So we all have to listen to you about that.
Passionately. Yeah. I loved being a librarian.
Now, Rebecca is a self-proclaimed audiobook addict, and Rule Breaker is one of her all-time favorites.
Oh, yeah.
Rebecca wants to know if you have any audio news of things that are coming out.
I do. Joel has finished recording After Felix. He's done an amazing job with it. It's one of my own favourites, that story. So he's done full justice to it. It's wonderful. And then he is recording 5 other audiobooks this year for me, and I've just got to finalise what they are.
Wow, 5 other. So Rebecca's going to have a lot to listen to this year.
Yes, indeed, yes.
Now, your last book from 2021, or at least one of your final books, because you did have your holiday story.
I did, yeah.
The Cuckoo's Call was one of Joyfully Jay's most favorite books of last year.
Yeah.
And when she was on the show back in December, she said, a lot of times Lily's stuff is very snarky and bantery, which I absolutely love. But this one is a little bit less so, and I think it just had a warmth to it that was really nice. So how did you approach writing Ren and Mateo, and kind of what made it into something that kind of broke away from the snark and the banter?
Oh, I love Jay. She's been so good to me, so supportive. I think that, it's because of the characters. For me, humour is very much driven by the characters rather than the characters being driven by the humour. And I don't think it works if it's not convincing. I think that if you give your characters a humour that isn't in keeping with them, it can make the humour unbelievable and therefore not funny. So I'm always very, very careful with that. I will literally, on my first read through of the first draft, I would always think, does that work? And I take out an awful lot and put an awful lot in. But it's constantly, is this the right pop culture reference for this character? Would he say this? Would he do this? So Cuckoo is very much a different book, and the characters are very different in that Ren is a very, very young man who's had a terrible childhood, but has somehow come out this very endearing young man who has this steadfast ability that things are going to be okay. He has this hope. And then we have, in direct contrast, we have Mateo, who has had every material advantage that you can possibly have. He's the heir to a hotel empire. He's a lot older than Ren, but he's also very, very cynical because of his own upbringing. So he's in direct contrast. And these two men come together in Mallorca through a series of events. And you can see them falling in love, but you can also see Ren gentling Mateo and smoothing down those edges without Mateo seeing it. So the humour reflects that. It's still there. It's a gentler humour because the characters and their romance is gentler. It isn't so sharp because it wouldn't have worked.
Mm-hmm. Did you get a research trip into Mallorca?
No. It was right in the middle of this is why it was set in Mallorca, because we'd been there loads. Can't Pick a Fort, which is where it was predominantly set, is somewhere that we'd visited many times. I was pregnant with my boys visiting there, and we'd been back. So I actually really knew the area. But at that point, when I wrote it, you couldn't really travel. Mm-hmm. Travel was pretty much banned in the UK. So the Cuckoo is set both in Mallorca and Venice because they're two places I already knew well.
Nice. You didn't get to take immediate research trips, but you'd been there before,
no.
So you had the basis
Mr.
of
Morton,
really understanding.
Very upset about it.
The last couple of years, you've also done holiday books. You had Merry Measure at the end of 2020. You did On a Midnight Clear last year. Yeah. Is this going to become a thing, the Lily Morton Christmas book?
Do you know, I quite like it. I really do. I'm not saying it's always easy, because usually when you write a Christmas book is June, July. And my neighbours initially, I think, raised their eyebrows because they got sort of Wham's Last Christmas pounding out of my office in the middle of a heat wave. But I really do like them. There's a different way of writing a Christmas book. There's much less angst. And so, yeah, I'm definitely planning another one. I hope that I can do it, that I can fit it in. But I'm definitely planning another one for Christmas this year.
And besides potentially a Christmas book and this new Blue Billings spinoff, what else can we expect from you this year?
I've got another short story collection coming out after the Will book. Basically, when I write a book, I always write an extra short story or two for the readers to say thank you. And they're usually either on my website or in my group or a newsletter special. Every couple of years, I'll bind them all together so they're in one place. So a lot of the close proximity extra stories are going into that, and I'm writing some extra ones. I'm doing one for Mags and Laurie. There'll be a few extra stories, so that's next. And then I want to look at a follow-up to Cuckoo, which will be Alfie and Enzo's story.
Oh, that's exciting that you're going to turn Cuckoo into a bit of a series.
I've had a lot of requests, and again, that's another example of characters taking light. I've had so many requests for their story from my readers. So yeah, I already know their story. I just need to flesh it out a bit first.
And hopefully you can go somewhere fun for that research trip too.
I hope so, but not the Caribbean.
No, not the Caribbean. At least not this year, maybe.
No.
So as we wrap up here, I'd love to know a book that you've read recently that you would recommend to our listeners.
Oh, I've read, and I'm going to tease a bit because it's not out yet, and I beta read Hayley Turner's first book in her new series, which is The Prince's Poisoned Vow, and it's absolutely amazing. I'm not teasing too much because it's out in May anyway, but it is absolutely amazing. Have you read any of Hayley's books?
I have, and I mean, Hayley doesn't even write in a genre that I tend to read a lot, but the way that she does it, yeah, I'm very into that.
Amazing. The Soulbound series was amazing. It was a brilliant series. But this one is her steampunk fantasy series. And again, I'm like you, that is not something that I usually read, but I absolutely couldn't put it down. She does such epic world building, and her characters are so brilliant. And it's so clever. It really is. So if anyone's looking for it in May, it's out in May, and it is amazing. I would highly recommend that.
Yeah, and I think you touched on what Hayley does so well, too, because anything that requires world building, I'm a little leery of, because it takes a deft hand to build the world and not make me feel like I'm getting the info dump, And
Absolutely.
she just does it beautifully.
It's effortless, isn't it? It's very, very good. I'm in awe of what she does with that, because it's very, very clever and it takes a lot of work. But yeah, this is another fantastic series. And I beta read for her anyway, so I'm quite lucky.
So how can people keep up with you online? What are the best ways so that they get all the news as things roll out this year?
I'm on Twitter and Instagram. I'm more active in Facebook, and in particular my group, Lilly's Snark Squad. I'm active every day in there, and I share everything in there first. Cover news, new book news, question and answer sessions with my characters. I'll write for the group. I write short stories. So I'm mostly in there, but also my website, which is lillymortonauthor.com. Again, everything goes on there. So if you're looking for anything, it's in there along with some extra short stories and things like that.
Fantastic. And if ever there was an aptly named group, it is Lilly's Snark Squad.
I love my group so much. They're absolutely wonderful. It's my real highlight of my day going in there because they're a lovely bunch of people.
Lilly, it has been amazing talking to you. Thank you for spending some time with us and talking about all these wonderful books.
Thanks for having me.